Hello, all you paranormal pondering people. Welcome back to Michelle's Paranormal Pathways. Today, we're going to talk about what happened with me and shadow beings in 1972 in Hamilton, Ontario. Yes, I have a lot of shadow being stories. I'll tell you the main story that started everything. Of course, Hamilton, Ontario, again with the limestone and the water connection. And throughout my life, when all of, I said that really weird, when all of the different experiences happened, and of course each one was different. Some were very scary, some weren't. And then 8 years ago, when Charlotte and I were doing the first videos of Our World of Wonders, shadow beings crept in a big way, and then suddenly in Coburg, Ontario, that one little aha moment that was the last piece of the puzzle, which started to bring everything all together, started with this first story. And I will show you on Google Maps where it happened. If you've seen my Milton, Ontario UFO story, you're going to know where it happened, but I will show you again. I will show you a couple of other places where I had shadow being incidents happen around this same time. Most of the Hamilton incidents happened between 1972 or possibly a little older. They would have started when I lived in Dundas, but the big story happened in 1972, right up until 1979, when my mom and dad split up and everybody kind of went their own way and I went my way, and things changed after that. So what happened? It happened again on San Francisco Avenue in the townhouses. Because our townhouse was the first one to be finished, they just sort of moved on down the row. So the unit beside us was finished next. And some neighbors moved in within a few months, not very long after we had moved in. There was a girl there who was a year or two older than me. I'm not exactly sure the year difference, but she was a little bit older than me. We were over at their house a lot. They were originally from England. They had been in Canada for a while. They talked about a lot of really interesting things. One of the things was that they had a house ghost. It moved everywhere they moved, it moved. So in England, it moved from house to house. Then it followed them to Canada, and it had been in a couple of places before they had gotten to the townhouses beside us. And I just thought, oh, you know, that's just the English telling their stories. Like, apparently everybody has a house elf. I just went to the Harry Potter land. A house ghost. Well, sort of same difference. And if you didn't have a ghost, you knew somebody who had a ghost. That was kind of the stories that, you know, they were telling. Oh, the pub down the road had one, or, you know, my Aunt Mary had one. Like, there was always ghost stories, which was fascinating. And one of the things that she was doing, which you overhear your parents talking because, like, we're all in the same room. And she was doing Jack the Ripper research, and she was going to be writing a book, which I don't think she ever did, because I never did find a published book with her name on it. But she was gathering evidence to prove that Jack the Ripper was a woman. But she also had evidence for all of the other normal ideas that people had, but she thought that Jack the Ripper was probably a midwife, so that when you're wandering through the streets covered in blood, people would yell congratulations and be happy because she had just apparently delivered a baby. But that was kind of the talk that was going on, and it started soon after they moved in. We were the only other people in the complex, so and we lived side by side, so it was just sort of natural that we would become friends. And, you know, Lisa and I were good friends, and my mom and dad we were right there, so barbecuing and doing all that sort of a thing. I do remember my dad being kind of upset that they were putting wedges of lemon, or was it lime, in his beer. He thought that was just the weirdest thing ever. I remember that. I don't know why. So it was one of these early moments when, you know, the chat was going on and they're talking about all this stuff, and they went outside to have a smoke and fire up the barbecue, and we were left inside looking at the really cool English magazines and just, you know, goofing around, having cookies and tea, which, you know, that's always a good day. And they had classy cookies like Peak Freens and stuff, like really nice cookies, and chocolate digestives, I believe, which, you know, hello, give me a cookie, I'm happy. I don't know where my little sisters were. They might have been playing in the basement, but they weren't in the room with us. They were elsewhere. So we're sitting in the room. The adults have gone outside, and we're by the big window and talking about, you know, girl stuff and school stuff and, you know, whatever. And they had like this big box fan. So it's July. It's not that hot. And the big box fans were massive back then and made out of metal. They had like a wire grid on both sides because the blades were big and metal. And if you stuck your finger in there, you were going to lose a finger. Like, you know, there was no air conditions that I knew of back then. Everybody had a big fan. The bigger the fan, the better. So we're just, you know, sitting and talking, and I noticed the fan was starting to go around really slowly. It would be like, and when it got to a certain spot, it would go tick, 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 very slowly, which was weird. It wasn't hot, so it was sitting on the floor. It was unplugged. Clearly, you could see the wire and the plug sitting on the floor. And the windows were shut, doors were shut. And I'm just sort of like looking at it. And Lisa's like, oh, that's George, our house ghost. And I'm like, yeah, right. And it starts to go faster. Tick, tick, tick. Now, it's not going full speed because you wouldn't be able to see the blade spinning. But there was no rhyme or reason for this blade to be doing what it was doing. It was big, it was heavy, it was metal. Even a gentle breeze coming through an open window would not have made those blades go around. And it's going a little faster, and I'm like, oh. Because it's like, okay, that's cool. And as I'm looking, and like the sun is shining through the big window, there's this shadow starting to form on my left. So it technically, if it was on George's side, it'd be his right. But, you know, I can see on this side a shadow forming, and it's dark and kind of moving around and getting bigger, and eventually it fills into a man with the hat. You know, typical shadow being guy, very dark, but different tones of dark quality. So it's kind of smoky. It's kind of continually moving like heat waves off of a hot road. So it's but it's also solid. I know that's kind of a weird way of explaining it, and 3D. So if you imagine, like I had a stocking mask on my face, and you could see where my eyes were, and you could see the nose shape and the mouth shape, but there's no detail to it. It's like, oh, they've got those masks, those, what do they call them, morphing suits or morphing masks, where it's like a really dark material that you just pull over like a stocking cap, you know, like that you can't see through, and it just makes a form. They use green green suits for green screens for, you know, doing special effects and stuff with these things nowadays. But so no features, and very typically, just a quick terrible drawing. A hat, a tall hat, but not a cowboy hat, and not a top hat, somewhere in between the two in height. Very clearly like an oiler coat. It had like a cape sort of a thing, but not like Sherlock Holmes, not like a flappy big cape, but you could see the lines and the big collar turned up. And between the different black tonal qualities, you could see the front of the coat was open and it was black. But as he became solid and formed in front of my eyes, he still didn't have legs. So everything was there, and he's standing up off the actual ground about so high, so that there were no feet or legs, but everything else was there. But very stereotypically, like if you see a picture that looks like this, the very first thing you're going to say, and it doesn't matter what that looks like, you're just going to say it's a shadow being. I mean, very stereotypical kind of a look that everyone is used to. And there he was, like standing right there in front of me. And I turned to Lisa and I say, well, like, what else does he do? And she's like, he's right there. Ask him. So I said, well, what else can you do? And he turned, so I'll use this hand. So he's facing me this way, and then he turns like this towards the window. And as he turns, he's suddenly just not there anymore. I can see him in the process of turning, and boom, he's gone. And then the curtains get moved, so like the ripples are going back and forth very clearly. You can see where he's grabbed it and he's wiggling it. And again, no windows are open. Nobody is sitting near the window. She's on the couch. She couldn't reach the curtains if she tried. And it's like that is really cool. And I probably said like, oh my God, that's really cool, like out loud. And I felt this cold, kind of like a breeze, like someone had just walked by, going down towards like the hall, and the basement door did like a ee, and then it just, I can't do it this way, just opened really slowly. Now you have to remember, we were like young kids. He didn't do anything that was frightening or scary. He looked a little frightening and scary, but only because he was different. He was a shadow, he was solid, and he was doing things. And when he came back into the room with us, like you couldn't hear him walking around or anything, obviously, but he walked right past me, and it was like really cold, and like you could feel like whoosh, and then the fan just tick, tick, tick. And to the best of my recollection, they referred to him as George. And basically she's like, you know, George must really like you because he doesn't show himself to strangers. And I'm like, oh, that's just great. But in hindsight, he was doing that so I would have some kind of a reference point for later on. I didn't know that, but that's what happened. And of course, I don't know if you can see this little pencil drawing. I'll try and come up close. Inspired by something I saw on YouTube, which is very quite accurate, where again, so he a rounded hat. He doesn't have the typical type of hat. But whenever I have experienced a man in black, the hat might be a little different. Sometimes you can see a little more detail of the body. Sometimes there is a bit of color, but it's still that dark, shadowy, sort of all of a sudden in your face kind of a thing. So when I was younger, there was a lot of oh, did I see something? And you turn and there's nothing there. So I had experienced that peripheral vision, something moving sort of at the side, but when you turn to look, there's absolutely nothing there. So that sort of a thing happened. And of course, the whole George thing happened all the time. It was just normal. Oh, the fans ticking, oh, the curtains moving. The cat, they did have a cat, which basically stayed in the basement. So like the door would be closed and the cat was downstairs. Every now and then the cat would be sleeping on the couch or, you know, on the coffee table. And then all of a sudden it would be like, and it would take off. And she's like, George, leave the cat alone. So like that sort of a thing was quite normal. And as time went on between 1972 and 1979, there was a lot of incidents in Hamilton, and I believe more so here than in other places because of the limestone and natural water sources connection, making the ability to see things stronger, like an antenna where it's like, oh, okay. I also have other theories that I'll talk about in video 2 when I talk about what happened recently with Charlotte and myself when we were filming our World of Wonders, because I'm keeping all of these stories and incidents that happened to me in my head. And of course, each one was a little different. Some of them were really scary. Some of them were just startling. And eventually, when I started to get like photographic evidence, and you're like, okay, there's something going on. So this was 8 years ago when we were first starting out into our World of Wonders adventures. Boom, I'm getting pictures. And I'm like, I know what people say about shadow beings. I know what's written about shadow beings. I am so aware of these stories, but it doesn't match what I know to be true. So I knew that there was more to it, and you're trying to piece it all together. Is it because there's different beings? Are some of them, you know, not actually shadow beings? Maybe they're just like ghosts or something. Like, and you're trying to fit everything together, even though it doesn't exactly fit. You're trying to make up some sort of excuses. Like, I know some of you out there are thinking, oh, well, you know, the really bad ones are the real shadow beings and these ones are something else. Like, you're always trying to make it fit. But when I get to the conclusion of why I believe shadow beings are so misunderstood. So you've got the people that believe that they're these malevolent, malicious, horrible, scary, terrifying beings. And yes, I have had those experiences, and I will be able to explain why those experiences are the way they are in part 2. I know, you got to stick with me for a little bit, because we're talking 50 years of experience crammed into a few minutes story. So yes, I'll get there, and when you hear my conclusions, which are so different than what you're used to hearing about shadow beings, you'll sit back and go, oh, so it may change when you're doing investigations and you're doing, say you've gone somewhere and something happened and you got scared and you want to clear, or you want to figure out what's going on and you felt scared. You need to have a couple of considerations. If you're looking at something only through fear, it will appear one way. Now, as a child, you have a shadow being appearing right in front of you and making things move and affecting some things. It should be terrifying. It should be scary. But it wasn't. And one of the things that I say all the time about the paranormal in general and about the shadow beings all the time is, at one point we were goofing around and I said to Lisa, sort of in a snarky, smarmy kind of a way, you can never trust a man in a black hat. Of course, I was kind of saying it to her, but addressing it to George. And her mother turned around and she's like, Michelle, she says, life is not like a movie. You can't tell who the bad guys are by what color of hat they're wearing. And she's absolutely right. We are sort of, ingrained to believe that the guy who wears the white hat is good, the guy who wears the black hat is bad. And that only came about because in cowboy movies that were filmed in black and white, you had to make it very clear who the good guy was and who the bad guy was. In real life, it's got nothing to do with color. It may have to do with skill set. It may have to do with a lot of different things. But you need to remember that black is all colors. It absorbs all colors. And white reflects all colors. So you've got one that is all colors and one that's absence of colors. So there's all these different little clues and hints. So let's go and look at some of the scary places and things that happened in the past. I've got this all set up, so hopefully it will work. So here we are with the computer. We'll just move that. Let's get rid of the shadow beings. There we go. Bye-bye, guys. And Google Maps, here we go. So here we are again, back at good old San Francisco Avenue. And if you click on San Francisco Avenue, it will come up somewhere back there. But you will see this strip of land with the two circles, the school. San Francisco Avenue curves around. And there's the townhouse. We lived on the end unit, and they moved in here. And at the time that this all happened, we were the only two families that were there. One thing to mention, there is a creek that runs, very tiny little creek, that runs through this little strip here. And this square area used to be a transformer station, a fair-sized one, that would blow up every now and then and was scary. Shooting out yellow smoke and blue sparks and the smell of like ozone or whatever that electric stuff was. So this is where that happened. And interestingly enough, as the years went by, I'm going to come over here to Ancaster. I say that like I know what I'm doing. And Ancaster had, if I can find it, is that the Lions Center? And there was a park that goes down. And of course, I'm having a hard time finding it. And in the woods, there's like a little place. I'm not sure. I'm a little lost. But it was like in these woods, there was like a little Boy Scout camp place. You went down the road by the Lions Center. And it was like in these woods, there were shadow beings. Because I used to get quite afraid of actually being there. And I was older. I was, on the Rocky Horror cast at one point, and there was a guy who used to like to go down there and meet half the people and, bring a bottle or two and just sort of have a good time. And my mom would go down there every now and then because it was close to home. And I really didn't like being down there. It was gorgeous down there, but I did not like it. Okay, where are we here? Oh, that, I believe, is, again, Ancaster. So can I find it? I know, just what you want to see. Well, it is over there, whether you believe me or not. Or is this Dundas? Oh, this is the Dundas one. Okay, so if you click in Dundas and you follow Highway 8, and it comes this curve, you come across the tracks, and this road goes up quite a steep hill. If you go back this way, there is a trail that goes back into the falls. You follow, this is the little river creek, and the falls is right in here. You can't see it. It used to be a little more open. And on this side of the falls and on this side of the trail, every single time we were there, and my dad used to like to go in there, and they would sort of climb around in there and goof around with a couple of the guys he knew, and just sort of leave us to be in the woods and have fun, haha. There was shadow beings along there and in there, which is another place that I don't know if they're still there, but that was another place. And Rattlesnake Point. Oh, I'm getting a bit of a weird light reflection. There we go. So Rattlesnake Point was another place that we used to go to a lot, and it's like a park, and it's up on the escarpment as well. There used to be buffalo down in one of these fields, but if you go to where you'll see the lookout and the caving area, and between those two areas there was a lot of beings all through this little area, especially near the caves. So all in, around, in through here. Every time we were there, I would see them. I would go there with my parents, and I would go there with my biology teacher, who was head of the Bruce Trail Club, and we used to go in there and keep the trails clean. And there was another section of Bruce Trail Club in Hamilton that we looked after, and there were beings in there as well. Actually, a couple of the guys, like big guys that were probably 6 foot tall, got scared in there and never did say what they saw. And if we come out a little ways, if you see directly across from Rattlesnake Point is Crawford Lake. And I had a very scary incident happen here. My mom used to love driving here, and we would, walk the trails. Used to be able to park right close somewhere where we walked in. I know this looks different to me, this whole part, but you would walk the trails around, and that was quite normal. My mom would bring a thermos of tomato soup and crackers, and sometimes there was peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, whatever. It was myself and my 2 little sisters. And after looking at this, okay, this is the area. I thought that it was that area, but this area matches exactly what I remember. And we would come, there was a couple of little areas where you could sort of sit in along through the trail, but we would come out to this area and we would sit and have a little snack or whatever. Mom would take pictures of the lake. And before we got to that little area that day, right in around here, I was getting really, really, really scared. Like when you hear stories about people that are come across Bigfoot and things of that nature, and they talk about just suddenly being so afraid for no apparent reason. That's what happened. And when we got to this area, I couldn't stand it anymore. Like, I had weird feelings every time we went here, but not the terrified, really scared feelings. And I had to be careful how I told and approached my mom what was going on with her anxiety and mental issues. And I just like, Mom, we need to leave. We need to go. And she's like, oh no, everything's fine. Blah, 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 blah. You just don't like having exercise or whatever. She could be quite snarky and mean. And I'm like, no, Mom, we need to leave now. And she knew by my tone. She grabbed my sister's hands and started to walk off in this direction to follow the trail. She was fully intending on going all the way around. And I'm like, no, we can't go that way. We have to go back the way we came, which was this way. And she just turned around and marched. Like, she knew that when I said that there was something wrong and that we needed to go now, she knew enough that, okay, we're leaving right now. And we turned and walked away. So those are a few of the areas that every time I was there was something going on. And the Ancaster one, if you look, like there's like the Lion Center pool and a little road going down in, and then there's a little hole in the woods, and there used to be like a Boy Scout camp down in there. And there's little creeks all down and through there as well. So again, you've got that water limestone, like that connection is very strong in all the places where I had very strong things happening. So if you are looking just for experiences, and it doesn't matter whether it's shadow beings or ghosts or imprints or hauntings, or I want to go somewhere, finding a limestone water connection is a very good place to start. It's also very good for getting EVPs in areas like that. So like there's a reason why the experience is heightened and maybe a little bit more frightening in those types of places. So move through all of the years where I've lived and moved. Usually the shadow beings have been outside, but I have experienced shadow beings typically with the hat in my high school in Hamilton, in my son's high school, in the town where we are now. I've experienced shadow beings in some major city or town, because we're not technically a city buildings, like in the Coburg, which is to the east, to the east of us. We've got pictures of him, right? Like, hello. So a lot of the experiences were outside, but I've had a lot of experiences inside as well. And an interesting thing that happened at one point, I had people that were seeing shadow beings in their home and claiming that they followed them everywhere they went, just like Lisa, the neighbors next door, where when we moved here, it followed us. Well, basically the same kind of a story. And again, a very tall man in the hat, long coat, like the very stereotypical thing that is described for shadow beings. And they felt very afraid, although nothing bad ever really happened. I don't know if that was a sneeze or a cough. Every time they saw it, they felt kind of weird before they saw him. They might see him out of the corner of their eyes. And I was called in, now this would have been in the 90s at some point. And I was called in to, like, you know, we just need some help. We don't know what's going on. I want you to do a clearing. I've had priests in. I've had Wiccan people in. I don't know what's going on. So they had me come in. And as it turns out, I did all the clearings and what I needed to do and taught them things to do and how to say it and all of that. And I says, this is not making sense to me. I'm not getting any feeling of bad, malevolent, whatever. I says, let me just do some dowsing. And dowsing is, it's kind of like using an Ouija board, except it's like usually a crystal on a chain, and you're asking basically yes or no questions. You can ask it to spell things out if you're patient. And it turned out that in this one particular case, this shadow being was one of the person's guides. like their personal spirit guide. So of course he followed them everywhere, and no amount of clearing was going to keep him away because he was her personal her personal guide, which was kind of funny. But it's funny how when this was learned and she was taught how to do the clearing herself, the situation changed, because it went from fear, like this thing is following me and it's dark and it's scary, to, oh, it's my guide. I know how to properly clear. They can still come and go because they're of source, not of, you know, the dark. So it was very interesting to have that happen before I actually had my aha moment in Coburg, where I got pictures to show you. So I'll stop here. We've had scary experiences. We've had interesting, fun experiences with our little friendly ghost, Lisa's friendly ghost that they brought from England. I've had some really scary incidents where I felt I had to run. We had to get out of there. There's something really bad going on. I've had in-between feelings where things feel bad but not horrible, like you know that there's something going on. You break out in a cold sweat and you need to leave. In Coburg, I knew there was something, and I kept trying to figure out what it was. And the confusing thing was that I got the pictures and hadn't seen the pictures right away of what I had captured. And the one little key piece was in the window up above. And Charlotte and I were kind of followed throughout the building. And I was kind of, I hate to say attacked, but I was in an energy that definitely did not mix with my own energy. Was it an attack, or was it just such a difference of vibrational frequencies that it made me feel sick? And as it turns out, it was something quite bad, and there was a reason why the shadow being was there, and that's my little clue. So I'm going to upload this. Hopefully it worked. Hopefully you have found this subject interesting, and when I explain what I believe shadow beings are, when you're doing your investigations, it will take on a whole new genre. You will investigate in a totally different way. You will have an understanding that, oh, we need to pay attention. Like, you can run, but that's when you get hurt. When you react with fear and you just sort of dash, which is exactly what you feel like you have to do, you need to just sort of be aware and be calm and deal with the situation as it happens. And you'll find out why in a few minutes. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you're finding this interesting. I'll see you next time.